Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Outside, the art and science of watch collection. Today I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a while. And this is where the movement that your watch happens to have is better than most in-house movements. And let me give you just one example. This is a watch I talked about recently. This is my Daniel Roth chronograph, and it has an El Primero movement. Now, I guys like Daniel Roth he can make anything. Right? He happens to like to make these like triple tourbillons now, and so he makes a couple a month, maybe one a month. And sells them for $100,000, and he's got people lined up out the door waiting to get one. So I mean, he's got nothing to prove. And on the other hand, he wanted to have a good chronograph. He wasn't going to throw any chronograph in there, and so he put in an El Primero in this watch of his. Now, this isn't to say that he couldn't make a better one if he wanted to, but it wasn't. On the other hand, he didn't put the cheapest one he could find by a long shot. So I thought, okay, well, let's go back and revisit the whole thing about in-house movements. Now, there are good reasons to have them if they're really good movements, as opposed to some cheap movement and and then charge you like it's for an expensive movement. Now, so looking at the root of this, I went back to this white paper that came out from the Foundation Horology, the High Horology Foundation, and the founders of High Horology Foundation are three. First of all, there's a Richemont group, which includes a whole bunch of really outstanding watchmakers, Vacheron Constantin, Jaeger LeCoultre, and then ones that are more known for high-end jewelry like Van Cleef and Arpels. There are a lot of other ones as well. The second one was Audemars Piguet, which is an independent, and finally was Girard-Perregaux, which is owned by the Kering Group, a French, sort of a French mini Richemont. Okay, so they put this the High Horology Foundation together, and then they have all of these different kinds of tweaks to it, and they have 5 things that they're talking about. First of all, legacy. Well, legacy can be very fractured. The best example is Beauvais. Beauvais was around, God, I don't know, something around the 18th, 19th century, and they did really good business with Imperial China, and then they sort of faded. And then, I don't know, about 15 years ago, Pascal Raffi took it over and renamed it Beauvais 1822 and made it into this incredibly good watch company. But the legacy is, I mean, there's no Beauvais Jr. who took it over and passed it down the family or anything like that. So this legacy, I don't count that for much. You have you take some that were really started at the beginning of the 21st century, or right at the end of the 20th century, like F.P. Journe and some of these other guys who are now like major brands. And their legacy goes back to day before yesterday as far as the history of watch making is concerned. The other one, the third one, well, the second one is InHouse Movements, and that's what we're going to talk about. I'll talk about that in a second. Finishing, this is so it's not just sort of a bunch of unfinished metal. The art of fine watchmaking, this is where you have engraving, gem setting, and enameling, and some of these other or to make a watch better than just sort of a simple off-the-shelf one. Finally, it's craftsmanship. This is hand finished and hand assembled. Now, these are all fine, but if you go through the entire white paper, there are enough sort of caveats in there that you can have a lot of different things. So what I want to start with, though, is really where your movements that are not in-house are usually better than either what is in-house or easily as good. So let's start off with, I'm going to start off with a brand that I am new to, and this is Van Cleef Arpels. Now, Van Cleef Arpels was bought by Richemont, I don't know how many years ago, and they have been a famous jeweler, and they made jewelry for the crowned heads of Europe and so forth, and it's just like one of the top jewelers in the world, and somebody's got their Van Cleef brooch or necklace. It's a big deal. But for watchmakers or watch collectors, they're nobody. So what they did was very interesting. They got together with some of the best watchmakers in the world and have them make either complications with some fairly standard base movement, or they had them do the whole thing from scratch. The two at the top up there, they're both women's watches, and they're complications that are made by Agenor, and those are the AGH, are the name that Agenor uses for all of their movements. So there's one's 3051, 6901, and 6029. The two at the top both won Grand Prix awards. All right, so we're not talking about, like they really did something interesting. The one at the lower right, now the thing about this one, this was to replace they had one men's watch, and thought, well, let's, what we should do is put in dual time for the modern man, and that's what they did. But they were told that in order to keep it thin, they'd have to not start with some other movement. They wanted to start with a Piaget, but put it in there flat, and they put in a mini rose or a micro rotor, and it's a very thin watch. Another one, and this is another award-winning one they had, was they used this is a Van Cleef Arpels watch. They used a Christian Vanderklaw planetarium module. This is another award-winning watch. So you can have, to have the fact that you don't do it yourself doesn't mean it's a bad watch. The part that had always sort of rankled me with certain brands was that they would put in a cheap movement and try to pawn it off as a watch with an expensive movement. They didn't tell you what it was. It wasn't, to me, that wasn't the thing to do. All right. Okay. Oh, by the way, too, Van Cleef Arpels had won 7 GP Grand Prix awards, and they're also a partner brand. Of course, since they're owned by Richemont, everybody in Richemont's a partner brand to the High Horology organization. Now, this next one is another thing that they've done is what I call pairings for credibility. You take the Mont Blanc 1858, and this was something, and I think this won an award too. I'm pretty sure it did, or it was one like it did. But the Minerva movement was to give Mont Blanc credibility. In other words, they're saying, well, here you got this watch by a pen maker, so what? And so they said, well, let's Richemont, who owns Mont Blanc, bought Minerva and then gave Minerva to Mont Blanc, and Mont Blanc uses it as its luxury top graded watches. They won an award. This is sort of funny. Years ago, they won one for a travel time watch. Mont Blanc did with an ETA movement. So anyway, they're not movement makers. there's one at the bottom, the Mont Blanc 1858 chronograph, tachometer limited edition. That did win a Grand Prix award for the best chronograph. Now the same thing with Hermes. Now Hermes is best known for ladies' handbags and scarves. They really make nice scarves. Those are the two big things. They actually started off making leather goods. Hermes did, for saddles and things like that. But they became very famous. They have one bag called the Grace, I think it's the Grace bag or something like that. But it was Princess Grace of Monaco, and it was a bag named after her because she liked it, or they made one like it, and then after that became a big deal. But not for watches. And so what they did, Hermes bought 25% of Watchmakers. Watchmakers is a movement-making company that makes all of the movements for Parmigiani. They're owned by the Sandoz Foundation, which also owns Parmigiani and a number of other things. And so what they did was that they, Hermes, one of their more famous ones is called the Hermes Slim de Hermes. And so they have the watch, the movement is Watchmakers 5401. And then they dolled it up and called it the Hermes 1950. Okay, so here you have something with Hermes and Watchmakers. Okay, now there's also some things that Hermes has done with Agenor. The one at the bottom, I think it's Times Suspended is the English translation of it. They also were award-winning. So these are watches that they're not putting in cheaper movements, they're putting in better movements. And this is because this is something we really haven't discussed that much. Now, here you have another group that are mixed. These are usually by watchmakers who are really good. They're extremely talented watchmakers, but they also have sort of a sideline of watches where they use a fairly standard movement and then put their own complication on top of it. For here, first of all, is a Daniel Roth. This particular one up in the upper left there is the nickname for it is Papillon, and it's has a Daniel Roth complication and a Girard-Perregaux base, and it just, to me, it's just a fabulous watch I'd love to have, even though it's not like a Daniel Roth base movement to it. Antoine Perzuzio complication has another watch I would really like to have. It's called the Trans World, and underneath you have a sort of a turning map. I think it looks from Antarctica upwards, and it rotates, but it's got an ETA base to it. But the complication that to me is the interesting part about it is all Antoine Perzuzio. Another one I'd love to have is by Vincent Calabrese. Complication, again, I had some videos on this particular watch, but it's got an ETA base to it. And it's very different. It's a wandering hour, and that's what I was like. Now, one I do have is Harry Winston, and the interesting thing about this, Harry Winston never even pretended to make his own movements. I mean, when they were sort of out in before they were bought by Swatch. So this is one of those watches, and it's by retrograde, and the base movement to it is a Girard-Perregaux, and the complication is the by retrograde, and that's an Agenor complication. So here again, you have something that you have a really good element to it, and then another one that's pretty common. So this is another kind of thing, is it in-house or not, sort of a moot point almost. Now, this final one has to do with watch companies that are they're more startups in certain respect. These two, one is J.N. Shapiro. Now, Shapiro's line, he's got called the Infinity, and it's Infinity Steel. And what he does, he has super good works on the dial, G. Loche, that he does with a, what are they called, a turning machine. And so he does that by hand, and so you end up with something that looks like a dial from a Roger Smith watch. And then the movement he puts in is I mean, it's to me, it's one of the best movements that you can get in a watch. And why it's not more widely distributed, I have no idea. It's called the UWD 33.1, and it was made by Marco Lang before he left, I guess, both UWD and Lang and Hine. He's coming out with his own. But now here you have a watch. You have a superior movement. And one of the things is that Josh Shapiro was talking about is, well, how come it's not in-house? It's probably me grumbling about it. But then I thought, my God, you make your own movement. There's very little likelihood that you could make a movement as good as Marco Lang, who's like a fourth or fifth generation watchmaker. And this movement is just, it's really remarkable. And why would you change it? I had thought about that, but then I thought, well, if you want to go out and make your own movement, that's fine. But I wouldn't, if you want to have the, sort of quality on top and on the bottom, it'd be hard to beat. Now, another company, one I like, is that they're doing interesting things, is Opium. And the Opium 786 Velios is their current one. Now, what they did is a little more complex. Technotime went out of business, and they got one of the Technotime calibers. It was called a TT718, and they did some things to the bridges and plates, and made it a lot more interesting. It has double barrels and so forth, and they're working with Soprod, and it's a fairly complex thing. There's another company that makes the movements, and that whole part of it I'm not too sure about. But this is not a typical off-the-shelf movement, and so again, you have some interesting possibilities here that Beaver used to talk about. Back in the good old days, nobody used in-house. Well, there's nothing wrong with not using in-house. The problem was using cheap ones to make more money and try to pass them off in a watch that was more than it was claimed. But on the other hand, there are a lot of movements that are better than most in-house movements, and this is something else that be keep an eye on. Some movements, anything that F.P. Journe makes, I don't think you're going to beat that, and some of the other ones like that. But there are a lot of companies out there that also make movements beside ETA, Solida, and Soprod. So it's Calypso, I think, is another one. I don't know what all. And then there's a whole lot of Japanese and Chinese movements that might be considered. Well, listen, this is something that I would really like to hear your opinion on, because since it sort of goes against the grain of like, you got to have an in-house movement. Whatever movement one has in a watch, the collector should know what it is beforehand. Listen, like to hear your opinion. This is an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. Until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.